Hi, everybody. Good evening. Dr. Misty Kaziesco here. Thank you so much for joining in tonight on Wellness Wednesday. And tonight's topic is going to be about a few conditions that many longtime trauma survivors do suffer with, and that is fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. These are very, very common within these patients. Okay, so if you are somebody with chronic trauma, you are somebody with systemic body pain, you're always feeling tired, you can't seem to get yourself out of bed at night, in the morning, you find that you nothing is helping you, and this is definitely a video for you, okay? Because this is not the kind of advice that you're going to get in a traditional medical setting. Okay. Um, so it's important to understand that people in the, chronic trauma survivor group are under and have been under like exuberant amounts of stress. Okay. And so what that does to your body, a piece of chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia usually has to do with adrenal dysfunction, or other names for this might be adrenal fatigue or HPA axis dysfunction. Okay. Um, you don't have to know all the details of this, but what I want you to know is that your body may feel like crap. And there's reasons for it. Okay. There are reasons for it, and there are ways to help it. Okay. So, usually, what happens is your body is under an extreme amount of stress all the time. Okay. So, a chronic trauma survivor could be somebody who, an older, of the older generations that survive things like the world wars, the Second World War, um, you know, things like Holocaust type things, right? More recently, trauma type survivors in those types of situations. You could be somebody who is also a frontline worker um, at a hospital right now this past year and be experiencing this. You could be somebody who has had a ex-spouse that was highly, highly emotionally and physically abusive to you, that you felt like the ball was going to drop all the time. You didn't know, you weren't safe, whatever it may be. Or it could be somebody who, you grew up in a highly dysfunctional or abusive environment and didn't get your needs met. So all that creates symptoms of those like post-traumatic stress. What that does is it puts your body chemistry differently than other people's. You're in a consistent fight or flight state. Your body chemistry changes. What this does is start to burn out parts of your body that help to regulate the stress response. Your body is not meant to be in a chronic stress environment. Okay. With fibromyalgia, typically you're going to see people who have heavy limbs, people with chronic fatigue, difficulty getting out of bed. They're going to a lot more brain fog, things like that. Um, so typically, right now, medically, um, there's not a lot out there. If you go ahead and look on the CDC website, you're going to find the medical help for chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia is literally to do antidepressants. It is to exercise, to take vitamin D, and to eat healthy or go to PT. Okay, so those are the recommendations right now for patients with chronic fatigue. Now, if you're somebody with chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, the thought of you trying to be like, yeah, yeah, sure, no, I'll exercise. Yeah, let me go run a marathon tomorrow, right? It doesn't exactly work like that. You're like, I am trying to get through the day without like sitting down a million times, or my body not to feel like tight and sore and constant headaches or think clearly. Okay. So that's important to understand that usually, like, what is out there for advice to help with these conditions usually defeats a person who's has fibromyalgia, right? Um, so it's important to understand that adrenal issues and HPA function dysfunction and dysregulation is a big part of this. Okay, and you're not going to find that at a medical doctor's office because medical doctors are not. That's not necessarily a diagnosis. It's more along the a dysfunction. It's from chronic stress. Okay. So what your body is doing is it's not able to deal with inflammation very well. You're chronically in a hyper neurological state. Your body is more on high alert. You might even be jumpy. So a lot of times people with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia may also have a PTSD, especially if you have chronic trauma, you might have a PTSD diagnosis as well, or potentially a dissociative type of disorder if it was at that extreme. What's important to understand is that, especially in patients with chronic trauma, they're trying to feel safe in their own skin. And a lot of times with emotional trauma, we swallow things down and then we store it within our body. Okay. So here's some of the things that we can do to help get rid of some of the symptoms of fibromyalgia, especially for those types of patients, how you can support yourself, and how to get your body feeling and getting more energy throughout the day. This is usually a very layered process. This isn't, I can't give you this as a prescription. This is more for informational purposes. Okay. So, addressing the adrenals is key with this. You may be somebody who is in a different phase. Usually, phase 2 or 3 is somebody with those symptoms, okay? Especially stage 3. Basically, what means is your cortisol levels are flat, okay? They should be like almost like this, like a hill, okay? Almost like a sledding hill. We're almost in winter, right? Not yet. Not yet. Okay. So this is not a curve we want to flatten, by the way. There's my corona joke. Um, this is a curve we want to keep very much alive. Okay. We want the cortisol levels to be high, highest in the morning, and then dip off during the day, and at nighttime be the lowest so that our body can produce melatonin, right? So if you are in a chronic stress state, you may be experiencing insomnia. Okay. So you got to get your adrenals under control. So if you are somebody who's always like you're kind of wired and tired and jittery, but you're still tired and you want your coffee and like that's more like phase 1 and 2. Okay. So really what you want to do is try and ashwagandha doing ashwagandha, keeping caffeine levels lower, doing things to regulate blood sugar, trying to do stress management, EFT tapping. Tapping is good. Any type of energy type of medicine is excellent for that. You got to get the sympathetic nervous system to down regulate. Okay. And you can do that uh, through those types of therapies as well as support for the adrenals. Okay. Once you start getting into phase 2 and 3 of adrenal fatigue, you're going to start to see a lot more body pain and fibro type symptoms. Okay. The reason for that is because cortisol really helps to manage inflammation. Okay. And your immune system. So as your cortisol goes down, your body's not able to respond anymore. Your body's in this chronic stress loop. Your hypopituitary adrenal axis is going off constantly. Your body's like, make cortisol, make cortisol, make cortisol when you're like super stressed. Okay. So eventually your body's like, no. Okay. And so what happens is cortisol helps to regulate inflammation. And what can happen over time is that can have chronic stress in general has a very immunodepressant um, issue. Okay. You get a lot of less immunity when you're chronically stressed. So patients with fibromyalgia, you're going to have higher amounts of systemic inflammation. Okay. You may not necessarily have like an autoimmune disorder, but you're going to have high levels of inflammation. Okay. You're going to be in pain all the time. Your muscles are going to hurt all the time. You're going to have headaches more. You're going to have more brain fog. That's partly due to typically higher levels of inflammation. So, doing things to regulate inflammation, very, very important. Taking supplementation, turmeric. A good one I like to use is either an arthrosoothe, which helps with systemic muscle and joint pain. especially for people who have like disc and degenerative issues. Um, or inflammatone. They're by Designs for Health. These are typically supplements I like to use to help with managing inflammation. Okay. Typically with patients with stage 3, 2 and 3 adrenal fatigue, um, utilizing a supplement I call adrenatone is really powerful because it helps break down cortisol slower so higher cortisol levels stay in your system. Remember, we don't want to flatten the curve, we want it to be up more, especially during the morning. Okay, so that's a really good one. And using something called Serifos at night to help to bring down levels in earlier adrenal fatigue. So supporting the adrenals is big. Okay. Secondly, managing inflammation. So watching your food levels that are sugar, watching you know, soda levels, things like that, all the things that are going to drive up inflammation. High red meats, foods, chips, things like that. Okay. Um, Things that are refined carbohydrates, meaning like a lot of white breads, pastas, things like that, that will turn quickly into sugar in your body and it will help to dysregulate and add to some of the fatigue as well. Okay, so support the adrenals, reduce inflammation. And the other thing that you really want to add to a regime of, especially for fibromyalgia patients, is magnesium and malic acid. Very, very important. There is a great supplementation that I use called Fibroplex that is very, very powerful and very great at helping treat fibromyalgia types of symptoms. Malic acid has been very great and proven to help with um, muscle tissue and help with systemic muscle pain. Okay. For patients who are chronic fatigue sufferers, mostly, you know, detoxification is very key with this, especially with chronic fatigue patients. A lot of these patients are having actual mold toxicity. And so if you're somebody with systemic, you have mold, you're living in a moldy environment, and then add onto it, you have this extensive stress and trauma or PTSD, you are going to have a decreased immune system, and then your body is going to have more inflammation from things like mold toxicity. Very common in chronic fatigue syndrome is mold toxicity. So, um, but one of the reasons is because your body can't fight off things as well. Your body can't fight off pathogens. So you might even have a higher viral load. Okay, you might have way too many viruses or pathogens. You just have such a large viral allostatic load that your body just can't give you the energy that it needs to actually have energy throughout the day. It's shunting all the energy to fighting pathogens, right? Why? Because your immune system is depressed because of chronic stress. Does that make sense? So, things you need to know and areas you need to focus on if you are a chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia uh, person, you have that diagnosis, or you think you might have that diagnosis, and or you have a diagnosis of PTSD, or you've had chronic trauma and you've had chronic stress. Okay. Very common in people, actually. There's been studies of women in domestic violence situations or have been married to a person, or men, women or men, excuse me, that have been married to somebody with a personality type of disorder, whether it's they have narcissism or they're sociopath or whatever. They're married to somebody who fits in that cluster B personality disorder like realm, and they come out of the relationship, if they can get out of the relationship, with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. Okay. And so it's like years of chronic stress and being like micro attacks and aggression every single day. So it's, that's something there's actually been, studies on that. And that's a very real thing. So, especially right now, in a time of quarantine and things like that, what people are being exposed to, the higher stress levels, the inability to escape to areas or cope and get away from those types of environments. People might be experiencing higher levels of chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, or newer symptoms of that right now because of our situation, the world situation. Um, so I hope you found that helpful. Again, really want to look at adrenals, balancing adrenals. You want to look at supporting your body with malic acid. Absolutely. You want to look at specific toxins and detoxing, and you want to help decrease inflammation. Very, very, very important. Okay. Um, if you found this helpful, which I hope you did, and I hope you were able to utilize it, please share with your friends. Click that love button. Also, if you are somebody who needs help in this realm, I do appointments, virtual consultations. I am happy to help or assist you or answer any questions that you have. If you are somebody who would really like to get access to some of the supplements, you can go to the link tree on my site. It will bring you to my dispensary, and you can go ahead and look up those supplements there on my dispensary. The supplements are adrenatone, fibroplex, and inflammatone. Those are the biggest ones that I was recommending. I hope you found this helpful, and thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys next week. If you have any questions, put them below. And if you have any other ideas of what you would like to hear about and learn about, I'm going off of what I've experienced and what other patients have had success with in this category. So thanks so much. And I hope you found that helpful. Have a good night.